Hi, I'm Alex. I'm Alex Swan. I'm at Eureka College, and this is a thrill for me because this is my first real invited talk for anything. So hopefully it's good and not a dud. So here we go. So one of the things that is really, really a passion of mine and has been for a really long time is movies. And I've been watching movies, since I was a kid, but when Netflix came around, and I'm talking about the real DVDs in the mail Netflix, 2004 was when I became a member, and I got 3 DVDs at a time, and I ended up at one point having 5 DVDs at a time, and haven't looked back since. So I've been watching a lot of movies, and I've done my best to use them appropriately with teaching psych, right? Because that's what we're all here for. So let me get to the right. There we go. Okay, so what I really want to do with this talk is sort of twofold, half and half. Talk about film as pedagogy, as far as just in general, then talk about how I use film in my teaching and what that has led to recently, and some members of the audience have been on the podcast, talk about my podcast, what the podcast is, who the podcast is really for, what people have said on the podcast, because I ask similar questions of all of my guests. And then sort of the other half, so that's like the first half. And then the last half is, last year I sent out a survey to members of STP, and for whatever level they're at, high school, community college, four-year university, whatever it may be, and to give me some data about what they do. So this is my preliminary look at that data. I've put it off for a really long time. And so for this talk, I went through and I grabbed some, what I thought was kind of important. I'm hoping to explore it a little bit more for ACT coming up later this year, but at least we can take a look at it. And then depending on the timing and things like that, we can jump into the breakout room, or we can just do a Q&A through text means. So let's talk about film in general and what it means to use it as a pedagogical tool, which is what I really like to do, and there are lots of ways to do it. So one of the ways that I use and other people use pedagogy, film pedagogy, is to figure out what psychological concepts are occurring in context. So a little detective on the part of both the instructor, but primarily from the students. Like, can you pick out the various psychological concepts that are presented either explicitly? So last night I watched Still Alice, lots of explicit examples of psychology in that film, or implicitly in a film like, I don't know off the top of my head what I've watched. What an episode of the podcast was A River Runs Through It. And that one you might not think of as being, oh, that's a movie about psychology. But so there are implicit themes there, or something like Inception, where you're like, okay, what are dreams, and how are dreams represented exactly? So that's one way to use film. And that's, I think for many of us, and this is a big assumption, but I think for many of us, that's really the main goal of using films, is to use a different medium for sleuthing. So films are art, and I really like this image. By the way, it's a Creative Commons 0 image. So and it doesn't do the thing wrong with it that has analytics on one side and art on the other one. It's just a pretty brain. So psychology is a science, right? And it's a great thing to mix science and art. Two generally lovely things about life, right? So film is the art, psychology is the science. How can we represent science to non-scientists? Okay, we'll use art. Art's accessible. Movies are accessible. So that's a second way that that an instructor can use film in their teaching. And then a more obscure one, but I have seen it discussed, and Bluestone discusses this in that paper, where you can get a little bit more of a lay understanding, or actually, let me put it a different way, to have a window into how somebody else who is not a psychologist views the psychology, what we know about human behavior, human thought, that sort of thing. And we can use that filmmaker's understanding, the writer's understanding, etc., right? Filmmaker, all encapsulated there. That filmmaker's understanding, we can use that as a proxy for public understanding, lay understanding. Okay, so a good example of this one would be something like Split. Movie came out a few years ago, M. Night Shyamalan, and it was entirely focused on dissociative identity disorder. The main character has DID and has been seeing a therapist, and there's expressions of what it is, what DID is, and how he's been treated. We have a little thing, a little side thing where a side scene, shouldn't call it a thing, a side scene where the doctor that's in the movie goes and gives a talk about dissociative identity disorder, talks about how rare it is. And so you kind of get a sense in that case, okay, how does the public think DID works? How does M. Night Shyamalan think how DID works, et cetera, et cetera? And then we can use that information in various ways. We can go back up to the sleuthing aspect of it. But what I, generally speaking, do with all of those three is talk about accuracy. Because art and the lay perspective aren't necessarily accurate, right? And so I'll put both of them up. The animation didn't work as I wanted it to, but here I have a few smatterings of what I consider to be, these are my opinions, but what I consider to be accurate portrayals of the psych that's represented in those films and inaccurate portrayals of psych that's represented in those films. So accurate portrayals, for example, and this is where an instructor can bust myths or explore avenues that aren't in the textbook as far as the concepts go, as long as they're accurate, right? Or you can allow the critical thinking aspect here of what is not being shown in those films that we talk about in class. So, for example, let's look at the accuracy portion, or the accurate portrayals here. So we have 12 Angry Men. I think this is, though it is dated, I also think the remake is also kind of dated, but a little bit better. But the persuasion, the conformity, they're all wonderful examples, all within that single room among those 12 men. There are many more examples, of course, and you may have used 12 Angry Men in social psych for that reason. It's generally on the list of films to use in social psychology, right? Inside Out is another example of, okay, it's an animated film and it's not real, but they do a pretty good job because, folks like Dr. Keltner consulted on the film. So they wanted to make sure that stuff was going to be accurate. The Pete Docter, who wrote and directed the film, wanted to make sure that even though they were going to distill it down for children to understand, it still made sense for adults. And it still made sense within the realm of emotion science at the time. So I would consider that an actual accurate portrayal. And I love the little details about the film where all of the orbs are stored as all wavy because of the things like your convolutions in your brain. So, I mean, it's wonderful little details here and there. A third example that I wanted to bring up is the Japanese film by Akira Kurosawa called Rashomon. And I spoke about this, and by the way, I've spoken about all of these on the podcast. That's why I bring them up here. But I spoke about this one on the podcast, and this one is kind of psychology meets art in the way that the art actually came first. So it was one of the first films, if not the first film, to show the imperfection of memory and using alternate storylines to show doubt about somebody's memory and what they remember about a given event, changing little details here and there. It's a lovely little thing, save for the medium in the, like, I think it's the third story that is the medium is acting as the voice of the person that was killed. Spoiler alert, the person that was killed. So save for that, it was 1950 in Japan, so and they go back to samurai times. We'll give them that. We'll grant them that one. But I think the idea that we name this effect the Rashomon effect is pretty telling on far as the accuracy of what we actually see when we question people's memories and what changes with respect to memory. As far as inaccurate portrayals go, recently did an episode of Rain Man, and it was abundantly clear that this is not generally an accurate portrayal of autism. It may have been the idea of the filmmaker and the writers at the time, and specifically looking at the folks that are generally called human calculators, but not necessarily autistic. And so it gives the instructor the ability to look at that film and be like, okay, so this was 1988. There's a scene in the movie where a nurse somewhere in the South is confused about Charlie Babbitt, played by Tom Cruise, talking about autism. And she's like, what do you want me to write? Autistic. And it's like, he's artistic. So there was a lot of stuff that we tried to clear up. And if you want to use a film that has a better, more accurate portrayal of autism, then I would use something a little bit, quite a bit more recent. And I'm only speaking in the realm of fictional Hollywood films. I know a lot of people like to use documentaries. I'm specifically talking about the fictionalized versions of all of these things because that's what allows the exploration that I've previously mentioned here. Christina's in the audience, and she and I talked about Lucy last year, and we had a lot of fun with this one. And we called it a rage watch because Lucy is not how the world works, how your brain works. 10% of the brain myth. You can give people this movie, and have them pick it apart because it is terribly, terribly inaccurate, and it doesn't even make good science fiction, in my opinion. And then the last one, Jordan's in the audience too. I saw she and I talked about Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. As much as it's an interesting representation of memory deletion and how things can be subtly changed when we reconstruct our memories or go back to them, being inside somebody's mind and using a computer program to find and delete, doing Control F, delete, Control F, delete, Control F, delete. It's not really how memories work. So you can sort of weigh the good and the bad in a movie like that. And so I thought these 6 represented a good gamut of the exploration one can use in psychology. And I don't know if Q&A is open yet, but if it is open, feel free to drop questions in there as I go through this, and we'll talk about those questions after. So how I use films in my classes is pretty simple. For the most part, I do it because I like it, and I'm a firm believer. I need to update my teaching philosophy, but I'm a firm believer in as long as you're enthusiastic about something, you can at least get a few more people enthusiastic about it. And so that's generally speaking what I try to do, even at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, where I'm not really all that awake. I try to get as awake and get jazzed about it. And so, I mean, this is more of a passive thing, but using movies as an assignment or whatever, but I like to share it with people. And I'm incredibly fortunate that I've had a lot of people come on the podcast already and have a good time about it, or with it, and want to do it again and have done it again. And it's just great fun having that connection with both you all and my students. Okay. And they're also a captive audience, as I said. I try to choose films where the context is incredibly important. And I use the full films because they explore the full context rather than clips. Now, I know people just use clips because it's quick, it's easy. You don't need to set aside, if you were to show the clips in class, you don't need to set aside 2 or more class days to watch movies. I do it to give myself a break. It's generally toward the middle or end of the semester. So, but I think the context within explicit uses of psychology are subsumed within the context of the film, right? So, for example, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, you can show the one scene where they're doing Control F delete on Jim Carrey's memories, but I think the broader context is, okay, why is he doing Control F delete on his memories? And so showing more of that is, I think, more important than just, okay, this is not how memory works. You can't just find a memory and then delete it. That's not how it works. Now, I don't disparage anybody who does that because time is of the essence for a lot of us. I just like to show the full context of the film in that case. I also try to choose films that show multiple aspects, multiple concepts. Sometimes this is really hard. Sometimes this is really hard. And I sort of get stuck in prep. Like, okay, when do I want to show it? What does it work with? So something like 12 Angry Men, I will show it after I talk about social influence and persuasion. And yeah, there are more social psychological aspects in that film just than, of those, conformity, compliance, obedience, and persuasion. There's more than that in that movie, but I try to target that. But something like Inside Out in a Psych of Emotions course really just grabs everything about what you would talk about in a Psych of Emotions course, and you can let the student choose which ones they want to talk about, because it just fits the entire course. And generally speaking, what I have them do is I usually assess that, showing the full film, getting the full context. I usually have a short analysis paper where they get to pull any concept from the course that they want that applies to the film itself. And it's generally speaking 3 of those concepts. So generally 3 paragraphs, 1 per concept, where they talk about the scene, and they incorporate the course material. So the language of the course, the vocab, the conceptual definitions, etc., within the context of the scene. So they're using character names, they're using points between characters, dialogue, that sort of thing. And I just let them explore that. I let them explore it, and for the most part, my students are pretty astute when it comes to that. And now that there are many episodes of the podcast, and many of those podcast episodes are films that I've used in my class, they have another avenue to go and find various scenes that me and our colleagues talk about there. So it really, I have not heard a single student, even though they may, I don't know, keep it to themselves. I've not heard a single student either verbally or through course evaluations say that this was something that they hated doing. Sure, maybe the writing was something that was sucky, but it has never been something that they were like, oh, I have to watch a movie? How dare you? So that's also, to get students on board with it. Which brings me to my my podcast stuff, and I realized I should probably pick up the pace just a smidge. So in 2019, I was like, I really want to do this. I really want to make a podcast, and I want to talk to other instructors. I want to talk to people who like movies, or dare I say it, love movies as much as I do, and talk about what they see in those movies, talk about what they do in their classes with respect to movies. And it's been super fun. So far, there's 27 episodes, I think, something like that. We focus on one film per episode. If you haven't caught it, that's the link to the main site, but you can get it wherever you get podcasts, honestly. You can also get it on YouTube if you really want to. And I really love talking. And this also, by the way, if you want to meet more people in the networks that you've created, or the networks that you are a part of, you want to meet more people, ask them to talk to you and record it. Yes, because people, generally speaking, love to do it. I don't know if any of you have gotten the chance to be on something like Psych sessions or something like that, but give people a chance to just like be interviewed by somebody, and it's pretty fun. It's pretty fun. And for those of you who've been on the show and enjoyed it, let other ones know, and then I can reach out to anybody who may be interested in also being on the show. And every episode, I ask my guests how they use films in their classes, what about films influences their pedagogy, and I have a few. I didn't grab audio clips because I was pretty sure that what was going to happen was I was going to run out of time. So I thought, what might be better is to just quote some people. So Win Goodfriend said, it's really important to talk about domestic relationship violence. It's not exactly what she said, but it's in brackets. And try to understand, of course, these are also addressed in film, right? So she was specifically talking about Harley Quinn and Joker, which is something, and domestic and relationship violence is part of her research repertoire. Jason Spiegelman said, this is the analog to send students out to the real world and tell me how psychology was applied to their everyday lives. So, and that's something that I think is useful about films, because, as I said, it was an art form, and the art form is approachable by everyone who decides to watch the movie. Mark Klippenstein said, I want students to get that psychology is everywhere. Psychology is in everything around us. That's also a very important point, because, and one of the reasons why I like the art aspect of it. It's just like, it's just another realm to show people, to show students that we talk about and teach the best science there is because it's everywhere. Yeah. Physics and chemistry are also everywhere too. But can you see molecules? I don't think so. And Olivia Aspiris said there are two main reasons that I use film or TV shows in my teaching. One is it just gives students this concrete example that I can talk through with them. And then it also teaches them that as you're learning about psychology, you can go out in the real world and start applying what you're learning, which is obviously fantastic. And it sort of hits at what Jason and Mark were also saying. So that is the pedagogy. I'll go back to this. I honestly didn't want to spend too much time talking about the podcast directly because it feels a little too self-promo-y. So I'll just say, if you're interested in listening to it, that would be lovely. If you're interested in being on it, let me know. And if you're interested in just hearing what other instructors have to say, you can listen to the first half of the episodes before we talk about the actual films. So there's that. But I don't want to get too much into the podcast itself because this is a research talk, I suppose. So, yeah, I make stuff. All right. So I want to pivot here to the film pedagogy survey that I sent out last year. To all of you, I got about, so I sent, my main place where I sent it was the SCP listserv. And let's see. I did have an ulterior motive for this one. So it was a half quantitative, half qualitative survey. And there was a sneaky question toward the end of it where I asked, what films do you use? Because I wanted more ideas for both my teaching and the show. And I hopefully when the call goes out for ACT, we will, I'm just by myself. Hopefully I will spend a little bit more time with this data, and it's 100% descriptive, 100% exploratory. There are no inferences that I make here. It's just, what do y'all do? That kind of thing. So I got 70 responses, and the breakdown was mostly female, and mostly white. So I would like to also relaunch the survey and see if I can capture some more diversity in there. Most of the instructors that answered were at 4-year schools, but there were a good amount of high school teachers. I was actually quite impressed. And most of them, I would say more than 3/4 were some form of full-time instructor. Okay. And these are just of the 70% of the sample, by the way. Just 70% of the sample that listed themselves at, 83% of the sample that listed themselves as a college professor. So that's the breakdown of those, the 83% of 70. Whatever that number is. And so this was my first question, which was interesting. So of the 70 respondents, 57 indicated that they used films in their classes. And you can see the breakdown here. I just did a frequency count of what they listed. And the vast majority used documentary. I'm going to ignore that bar for now. Because again, my focus is on fictional films. And you can see that the vast majority use drama. And followed up a little bit by comedy. And I understand a lot of people are a little wary of comedy. It depends on the comedy and the appropriateness of the comedy. I'm a little bit more open with the films that I show in my classes because they're adults. I always offer alternative films if they do not want to watch, say something is R-rated or it has a little bit too much violence or something like that in it, or if it's too raunchy or anything like that. So I understand why people would shy away from those and prefer to use things like drama, which are a little bit more subdued in their themes and in their portrayals. So something like Awakenings or Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, that sort of thing. Like four people mentioned biopics. So something like A Beautiful Mind, which is an interesting portrayal of schizophrenia, but an inaccurate portrayal of John Nash himself. So it's a good one to go back and forth with as far as accuracy and inaccuracy goes. And then a lot of others. There was a lot of I don't really know how to classify others, so I just lumped them together. And then I asked about assessments and other deliverable kind of things, and the vast majority, and this was select all that apply basically, and the vast majority use an in-class discussion. So I think this generally is coupled with watch on your own time, and then we'll talk about it, or I'll show a clip, and then we'll talk about that clip. So I think that's how in-class discussion is used. Almost half of those 59 responses in this particular question use a film analysis paper. So I'm in one of those groups there, a film analysis project. So I separated that out as something creative. So do they make an advertisement for psychologists or something like that? Do they use an infographic? Something a little bit more creative than just I'm going to write words on a paper to hit a word limit or a page limit or whatever. Some people test. I used to test, but I moved away from asking questions on my tests about the films, and that's because it makes those that miss have to watch it on their own time anyways, or they completely miss all of the material because they miss both days of class. And they have no idea what's going on, and they get those questions wrong, which, generally speaking, I've come to realize that that's not fair. So I've moved away from that. But, a good portion of people still do ask questions on tests, and however they handle that would be up to them. I did ask how they ask students to consume the films, and out of, I think those must be percentages. I don't know why the percent symbols aren't there. Those are percentages. Most, I keep saying most, 25% or so have them. What is with these blue colors? I should have changed them. I apologize. Get my cursor over here. Okay, good. My cursor is there. So these folks only do in class, only show in class. These folks do both. And then these folks are 100% out of class. And then this 4% said that it depends on what film it is and what class it is. And then I asked them to specify. I just didn't include that here. I think length has a lot to do with it. So if it's a 2-hour film and you teach a 50-minute class, 2 hours is generally, since they're 50 minutes, 2 hours is 3 class periods, 2, and then that third one, you have to take some time for that last little bit of the movie. So it's not necessarily all that helpful versus a 90-minute class. And then I asked, one of the questions that I asked, and this is the qualitative part, and I bolded what I thought was the most crucial aspect of their responses. How do you feel films work compared to other teaching resources? Hold students' attention because they're movies and that's what they're designed to do, right? Critique accurate and inaccurate elements. So I mentioned that earlier. watch it again through a new lens. And this is specifically about students who have previously seen a movie, so something usually popular. I think this is going to get, as we age and our students stay the same age, and we keep using the same films over and over again, they probably won't have seen it. And so this one's going to get less and less applicable. But, I showed Rashomon a couple of two falls ago. I showed Rashomon, and I told them, hey, it came out in 1950. It's black and white, and it's in Japanese. So get ready to read. And I mean, some students said it was hard to follow, and I can sympathize, I can empathize. But films just used to be that way, and we don't have to always watch English films. I feel that they are superior to lecture when concepts from the text and from the class can be illustrated in the film better than the illustrations in the text. Am I right? Because they're moving pictures. A very few students will be reading peer-reviewed journal articles their whole lives, but they'll all be watching movies. I like that juxtaposition from this respondent because, I mean, it's super accurate, right? I included one of these because of the word itself, but I also asked, what are your impressions about students' abilities to be critical? Because, right, the first use of films in class that I mentioned was for the students to be sleuths, to have them go and find the portrayals and then, conceptualize them within the context of the class material. So I wanted to see whether or not instructors could recognize that amongst their students. And so this first one, I learned a word when I read this: perspicacity. Perspicacity, the quality of having a ready insight into things, shrewdness. So the students themselves are impressed and surprised at their perspicacity. Ask Sylvester Cat to say that one. Perspicacity. Most students can read between the lines, but many doze off and miss the plot. Okay. Well, that's going to happen, especially if it's in a dark room. They're used to attending a movie for fun. Well, we're attempting to break that fun, right? As teachers, we're just attempting to destroy all the fun that they've had, yeah? I think as they progress through the course, they learn to be more analytical of the world around them. About the same as with reading, the students are better critical. Some students are better than criticals. Excuse me. Some students are better critical consumers than others. And I think that's true for most assessments that we give, regardless of if they're for film or not. And as with most things, it typically requires asking specific type of questions to prompt critical thinking. So I rather than having just super positive comments regarding that, I thought the last two would be useful to sort of contrast the use of films and having a more lackluster experience, either as the instructor or seeing the lackluster effort from students. And I think this might be my second to last slide here. So I asked, what pedagogical and practical challenges have you experienced? Students struggle with content of film if the content is emotionally stressful, right? And I'm a firm believer in always offering a less emotionally stressful alternative. And I usually link, if it's a film like Inside Out, I don't. But if it's a film that's rated R, I usually find either a more approachable, more subdued rated R film, just based on what the MPA has rated it for whatever reason. But I usually link to Common Sense Media, I think is the name of the organization. A family-based organization that goes through and sort of expands upon the MPAA ratings and whether or not it's suitable for which age group, sort of in addition to just the letter rating. Using films is getting students to think about the experience of others different from them. This is especially true if you use films that so my students are generally white, generally rural, so I like showing them films of people that are not like them. Okay, real challenges that students of color face while not reinforcing stereotypes. So that's a really important line to walk if you are not using documentaries. Technology is a complete pain. Preach. Okay. Discussions sometimes are derailed by students wanting to talk about plot elements, especially if those plot elements are not. So I think these are indicative and sort of encapsulate the pedagogical and practical challenges. And they're worth exploring. This is, for me, an iterative process. So if I show a film and it lands flat, then that film probably doesn't get used again. Like I said, I found testing wasn't a good idea, so I've moved away from that, and it's all just all of my use of film now is either we'll watch it for fun, or at the end of the semester, or you're writing a paper on it. That sort of thing. And so it's an iterative process. Do what works. And this has helped me sort of conceptualize not only my struggles, but what other struggles, what other instructors have as their struggles. So I thought this was very, this question, and these are only 4 responses. I thought this question was crucially important to the whole discussion here. And I just want to add a few closing remarks. Really good on time. I am impressed with myself because usually I put far too much information in far too many slides. So film pedagogy, it goes without saying, is pretty varied. I love talking about what works for people, what doesn't work for people, with them, of course. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to do the survey, is to find out what everyone else was doing about it. And it's a big topic too, right? So not only are films aplenty, but the psych is aplenty in all of them. And if you want to get started in this, if this is something that you haven't really explored before, then a good psych of film course is a great place to start, to get an idea, because generally psych of film courses are across most of the subdisciplines of psychology, with a film representing one subdiscipline like every week or something like that. Wynn Goodfriend is teaching a psych of film class right now, and she's a great resource for that particular piece. And like I said, let me know if you are interested in chatting about movies, either on the show or off the show. I love talking about it. If I could talk about it for the rest of my life, I probably would, but it doesn't pay the bills. So that's why we're here. So if you want to chat about that, just let me know. You can hit me up on my school email address is just aswan@eureka.edu. You can find me on Facebook in the STP group. Find me on Twitter at Prof. A. Swan. I know none of this is written down, and I apologize for that. And then I just want to end by saying, as this was my first real invited talk, not what I call invited talks on my CV. This is my first real invited talk. I want to thank Karen, Nyla, and everyone with SETOP for this opportunity because of pandemic. So yeah, I think what we'll do then is just switch to the Q&A.